Israel has the talent of a magician. It is able to make things disappear and then reappear and disappear and reappear at its will. And that is exactly what happens in Gaza. You know, the Gaza Strip has no natural boundaries. In other words, there is no natural area that makes sense to be called the Gaza Strip. It's a line that was drawn and an area that was created in order to in order to house the hundreds of thousands of refugees from 1948 from the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. And from day one, it was a humanitarian disaster. This claim by the UN that by 2020 it'll be unfit for people to live and a humanitarian disaster is again, it's the height of hypocrisy. It's been a humanitarian disaster from day one. Not a single, if this was Europe, if these were white Europeans, the Gaza Strip would not have existed anymore. In other words, the problem would have been solved. Yet 2 million people live there, and without water fit for drinking, without access to basic most health care, without access to food, without access to the world, without access to travel, without access to business. It's basically an enormous concentration camp. And from time to time, Israel has to attack Gaza. And when we look at the attacks on Gaza, they began almost as soon as Israel created the Gaza Strip. Attacks on Gaza began in the early 50s. In the early 50s, immediately after the Gaza Strip was established, Israeli commandos began going in and committing massacres in Gaza. And from the very beginning, there had never been a military force in Gaza. There's never been a military force. There's never been a tank in Gaza. But in the beginning, they called them infiltrators, so they had to go in and punish the infiltrators. Then they called them fedayeen, so they had to go in and fight the fedayeen. Then they called them terrorists. Now they call them Hamas. There's always something in Gaza that is dangerous, that is endangering the Jewish people. You know, even though there's never been a military force, and there's never been a military threat. Never been a military threat to Israel from Gaza. The mere thought that there can be a military threat to Israel from Gaza is absurd. But there you have it. Israel says it, and the world believes it. And then, boof, Israel makes it disappear, and it's gone. And then when Israel commits massacre after massacre after massacre, regardless of how many thousands are killed, and how many tens of thousands become homeless and injured, it disappears. Nobody talks about it. This is one of the highest profile places in the world, yet Israel manages to make it disappear. And we're not talking about a small community, we're talking about 2 million people. 2 million people, that's the size of a small country. And Israel has to escalate. Israel has to commit these massacres because Israel is faced with two choices with Gaza. Fix the problem, allow the refugees to return, rebuild, or kill. Now, the first option is not acceptable because we don't want the Arabs back. We just got rid of them. So that's out of the question. Doing nothing is impossible. You have to do something about this disaster. So what Israel found is you can kill them and call them and blame them for being terrorists. And the world applauds. I mean, it's incredible how Israel manages to massacre innocent civilians and the world says it's self-defense. You know, it's a magic trick. I don't know how anybody can be so gullible, so stupid to accept that this massacre of innocent, unarmed, harmless civilians can be called self-defense. Self-defense from what? But I do think that Israel had the problem with Gaza. There is a threat to Israel from Gaza, but it's not a military threat. It's a threat to Israel's legitimacy, because this humanitarian disaster is a direct result of the creation of the State of Israel, and that is a threat to the legitimacy of the State of Israel. And Israel can't allow that. Israel can't allow any threat, any questioning of its legitimacy, because it has no legitimacy. So it always has to pretend, it always has to fight these attempts. And that's why people in Gaza suffer.